assuming some of you have had a chance to read the report and at the minimum the executive summary. It is actually very fascinating because at least to me it shaped destroyed a lot of myths and shaped perspectives on the sector, and importantly in a lot of the other areas that at least I have a little bit deeper perspective in. This topic I actually don't have deep perspectives in, but a lot of areas that I have slightly deeper perspectives in, you realize that there's such a big opportunity for collaboration. And Rohini and I often talk about this, that convenings like this are incredibly valuable because there's a huge opportunity in our sector to learn from not just what works but what doesn't work. And so when you learn, when you gather information in a format where you can actually just see what is working and then not try to reinvent the wheel, and importantly sometimes also learn what is not working from gatherings like this and share things very openly and frankly, I think you can achieve a lot more. And so for us, I think that was a little bit of what we were trying to achieve when we embarked on that journey. And I must say the report did full justice to at least what we expected, and probably went beyond. And I must say that at some point of time, we had to make a strategic choice. We were doing a lot of work in rural development and capacity building, and we felt that this area was as deep, if not deeper, than some of the verticals that we were working in. And so we felt that to do justice to something like this, it needed to be carried forward by someone who was very deeply embedded in it. So I'm actually very grateful to R&D for having taken the report. Again, this is exactly the kind of philosophy like Rohini and believes in, and Archana and I also embrace, that there's no knowledge which is proprietary in the sector. We all have to build upon each other's knowledge, whether success or failure, because all of us are ultimately solving for greater good. And so I'm truly grateful, Rohini, to you that you thought there was good in this report, irrespective of who funded it and who did it, and you're presenting it to this to this convening. I'm here actually to learn, as much as just share a little bit of what the origins of this report is. But thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much, Amit. You'll hear lots more from Lakshmi as well. But mostly we want to hear from all of you post this panel discussion. Lakshmi is Dean and Professor at the Tata Institute of Social Studies. She has a PhD in Women's Studies from IIT Bombay and comes to us with close to 4 decades of experience as a teacher, a researcher, and I think I would like to say an advocate for women and human rights. So thank you, Lakshmi, for being here. I'm going to start with you to hear first your reflections on the study.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks very much for inviting me. I'm also so delighted to be in this place. It's almost like we are celebrating, dealing with COVID. We wouldn't say it's all gone, but definitely coming together helps us to move forward very well, and I think these spaces are very special and precious. Thanks very much, Abhijit, for that presentation, and I know several decades of work is all being कूट के भर के 10 minute में बोलना बहुत मुश्किल है, and you really have done it, and great for that. What I was super impressed in the report and also in the presentation that Abhijit made is where he mapped the changes that are happening in women's lives and also the changes that men seem to be actually going through. And that basically helps us move towards really looking at, what are the real issues of men and women. It helps us also go a little away from a meta-narrative of all women as victims and all men as perpetrators of violence, to actually looking at how do men and women cope in everyday lives and what seems to be happening in their lives. And I've been on several interesting research projects that I'm doing, and thankfully I'm able to travel into rural areas, particularly Maharashtra and Gujarat. And what we actually see is women and girls are out there, okay? Very small interesting questions that we ask them. Do you wear a matching blouse? Do you carry a handbag when you go out? Do you color your hair if you're an older woman? Do you go to a beauty parlor if you're interested in going? Do you go and see a film? So ideas around leisure, pleasure, which are denied for women. If you start seeing, is there anything happening there? You actually see things are happening there. Okay, going into a theatre to see films doesn't happen, but they're all into wearing a matching sari, matching blouse, footwear. So they're all dressed up and nowhere to go because of the levels of literacy they have and the fact that the economy is not really providing so many opportunities for them. However, we see that there is a steady rise of homepreneurs. In the sense they stay home, but they are doing different things, want to earn money, want their girls to study, want things for themselves. So there is a big desire and aspiration for shifts to happen, and they definitely look at education as a vehicle for that change, and education for girls and for boys. And something that I'm exploring and I need to write up is there a story and a finding that we have there about why work participation rates of women going down while rural aspirations are going up. Okay, there's some story there which hardened researchers like us have always been talking about, daycare, maternity benefits, definitely reduction in domestic work, men sharing in work. While all that is so important, I think there's something more happening around aspirations. And I think given, coming back to looping what I'm saying to what you have presented, Abhijit, I would say that moving from a meta-narrative of an alpha male to looking at everyday men and working around what it means to be a man and what it means to be dealing with other men, I think that needs to be really taken up, because most of our work is about men and women. While that's so important, it is actually the toxic male cultures that men keep reproducing, right from school, bullying that happen in school, not accepting gender as a very diffuse category, as a fuzzy category, maleness as something that can be very, very different. These don't really happen in schools, and teachers, school system does not look at that. And a lot of bullying that happens among boys facing a lot of bullying, etc. So I think working with men and boys is definitely very, very important, because as you said and what we have seen, women are saying, don't tell us, tell them. हम बदल गए, उसको बदलने को बोलते, okay? And the other point is that women are all dressed and nowhere to go, and the big scenario is they are going through what is a scenario of conditional freedom and conditional choice. And the conditional freedoms come because of great concern about women exploring their sexualities, great concerns about women making decisions about whom they would love to love and whom they would love to marry, and definitely not falling within the grids of the caste and religious structures. And that's a huge tension, and families would like to control their women. And also with the digital that has come up in a big way, most women also we've seen do have phones, and at least 50% of them also have smartphones. And they're actually told, don't do anything with the phone other than checking WhatsApp, taking calls and making calls, because this is the vehicle for seeking information, this is the vehicle for seeking support, this is the vehicle, this is the new public space where you can play out while you're very much within your domestic domain. You can get a call, you can speak romantically to someone, you can make a small little trip out and meet someone. So, घर के अंदर चौकड़ी में रह के you can break the Lakshman Rekha. So people are definitely very worried, and these young brothers are now given the responsibility to control their sisters, right? When we were growing up, not of course in my family, but brothers will say, why is your sari blouse neck so low? You know, where are you going? And you'll say, Tera damn man, you do what you want. We used to do that with our brothers. But now it's like, किसका फोन आया है, किससे बात करा है, फोन में पासवर्ड मत रखो, let me check. This is what brothers are doing because parents have no clue what these phones are, right? So there are new dimensions of the male control over women and the concerns around expression of sexuality and men getting the responsibility once again to see that their sisters and mothers are within the domains and controls of sexuality of caste and class and religion, etc. So what I'm basically saying is what I'm looking at from the women, I can see how important it is to deal with these concerns with men. That is when we have programming that's happening that's really going to enable an equality to come, if not now, very immediately. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Abhijit, you talk about in your report and even in your conversation today about learning from each other, right? For organizations, how they learn, peership. What are your next steps and what do you suggest this group does, right? We have practitioners in this room who are working so passionately on this subject. How do they learn?
We have to continue convening such conversations because one of the things is, this is not a curriculum that has an end point where you say you've graduated. And now that you can go out and explore. The world keeps changing, the ecosystem is changing all the time. And in this changing ecosystem, all of us are struggling. I think the important thing about grounded practice is that we develop our so-called theory of change every minute we are out in the community. And as I negotiate a particular reality and I find a new strategy to cope with the problem because work throws up a practical problem, I find a practical solution because it has to help my work. When we meet two of us solving problems, I think we get insights about how he or she solved their problem and how that could help me and how I shared my problem. And this is where I think the incentive to share even failures and problems have to be found. Because unfortunately, the knowledge-making industry has become papers which are success stories. But each success story has many struggles, innovations and failures. And each of these people who are sitting in this room today, all of us are innovating, micro-innovators on a daily basis. So where do we pool our micro-innovations? And we are not great at writing. Practitioners, unfortunately, in India, we have the oral tradition. So thankfully, I have been an interpreter for many other stories. That's my good luck. But we have to help each other to interpret our stories and find the lessons. So, long story short, and I think is also looping back many of, when did I meet Harish for the first time? Ravi for the first time. So, it's all 25 years plus. But we're looping back. We'll probably be sharing again. And if we can create this community, then it's not important for person A or person B to meet. But the process continues and person A, person B, person C, person D, their experience becomes part of the Prabha. And we are the great Prabha tradition, right? In the Indian subculture or subcontinental culture, we believe in these waves. So we have to keep a learning wave going, independent of who is the individual learner, and a process that helps practitioners' experiences to be processed into knowledge. Like this knowledge product will not, that we have prepared with your help, will not stand the, let us say, test of, let us say, is it empirical, 100% backed, is it replicable? The tests that Western science puts on us. And I'm a Western science trained practitioner. I'm a public health practitioner. I come from that discipline of p-values. But we've incorporated all those p-values into our work around human complex change. We should also, this can be a kind of pushback of knowledge making from grounded practice.
I have one more question for you. You talked about strong monitoring and evaluation. Have you seen a good practice that you can share with the group on what solid M&E would look like in this space?
Well, a solid M&E again, for whom? If it is a Bill Gates funded project, it will want a particular M&E framework which is 50% of the budget of the cost of the project. When even I feel, I feel morally cannot participate in that process because it's 50% to the data processes, can't be done. It's morally not possible. So I think again we have to find those people who can convert the narrative into a lesson. And I think people like Lakshmi are more trained because I have learned anthropology, I have learned sort of on the fly, associating with people like her. Because our training is biostatistics. You can't do biostatistics for this. So, point is, if we, in this learning collective, if we find also some interested interlocutors who will ask the questions, the whys, because all of us are good at narrating stories. You need to ask those questions, like in qualitative research we say probes, and then interpret them and sajao them into the themes, into the domains of what interests the other world to see. And also, people learning from each other. I would love to be part of such a process. We have proposed that such a learning process be done. And I strongly believe that, at least for a person like me who's not an active practitioner anymore, that's a role that would be extremely useful to play. This interpretive role.
So we're going to break up the group, this large group, into smaller groups. But before I do that, Lakshmi, there are two things that you want this group to discuss, or these groups to discuss. Taking away from today's research, what are those two that you would urge them to think about and talk about?
Thanks. So one, I think, whichever organization one is working in and whichever group that one is working in, it will be useful to look at what are the barriers that women often express and who is causing those barriers and what is it among those groups that needs to be looked into and worked on, right? So that's one thing. And second thing is, if one were to work on men and masculinities, what are the kind of capacity building that's required, and what are the kind of toolkits that we think we need to have in place? Because when we started work on issues of gender sensitivity, there's several gender analytical frameworks that have come up. There were interesting guidebooks that came up, lots of different games and many things that were there. So people then picked on those and then reworked it and then started working in their communities. So what kind of stuff do we require, to start talking to boys and to start talking to men, which will enable them to think that it's about them and not some other men. Right? Because they'll always say, "Hum bahut achhe hain, we take care of our family, those are bad men." So it's always then men who are consuming alcohol, men who are consuming drugs, or some gunde log, some mawali log, it's always somebody else. So even within men, it's always othered. So how do you move away from othering to then looking at yourself? I think that part requires then better development of frameworks and toolkits. So what kind of things that people think they would want, I think that's the other one.
Okay. So two questions. I think all of you heard barriers and capacity building for organizations that are working on men and masculinity.
In order to address violence against women, you don't have to be this macho man or address an issue of violence through aggression. है ना? क्योंकि फिल्मों में तो ऐसे ही दिखाया जाता है कि aggression है तो आप एक दुश्मन मारो and then you're like the hero. But real men are not like heroes. They are heroes in a different way.